Alright, I think I heard a comment about the audio quality of the tutorials on YouTube this semester not being too great.
There's like a background drone.
Yeah. Okay.
Drone.
Drone. Huh. Well, thank you for that segue. We're going to start the drone assignment now. So I've got my reference images in here. I'm probably going to start, I'm going to load in this, of course it's going to open in this program. This is the DJI Phantom 2 drone, as I showed a minute ago in Google Chrome. So I'm going to load this image into my top camera, and then we'll get to work. So Shift V to get to our viewport settings, and then we go to back tab, image back, and we can load in our reference.
That will, oh, we have to click on the dot 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 to open it.
Mm-hmm. And I know which one's my top view because I've diligently named my files. So top view, alright, cool. I'm going to turn off the grid because I hate the grid, but that's just me. So how do you make this? That's a good question. This is obviously not like any of the primitive shapes we have. You know, the basic cube, of course. The basic cube, a cylinder. You know, it's definitely not a pyramid. So how do we make a shape like this once fireworks closes? That's a good question. And I hope that this is recording.
The red dot down there, so.
Yeah, I just mean the audio. This is what I've got to look at. Usually the green is like, the green's my levels. And like when I say hello into it, I don't know. So we'll see if this has audio on it. I didn't do anything. So what I wanted to do is open this with this one. So that's kind of the million-dollar question when you're starting out with a weird shape like this: is how do you start modeling it? Because we don't want to. We would not want to jump into our top view and then start tracing around this and like using like the sweep or the lathe, kind of like how we made the bottle. We would not want to do that. What we're going to want to do is decide what kind of object, the primitive objects, you know, cubes, sphere, cylinder, etc., which of those best represents kind of the main body. And now for this one, it would probably be a cube. But real quick, if I just pull up the drone that I did last semester in reference images, so of course, so I did this one, and this one you would want to start with a sphere, just because the main body is basically a full hemisphere, a half circle. So if you are picking whatever drone you pick, you want to stop and think, you know, what's my first move here, because that'll be pretty important. You know, it's like kind of what path are you going to walk down in a choose your own adventure book. You don't want to wind up walking off a cliff or meeting your fate too early. So I think the cube is going to be what we're going to start with. So if we make a cube and we zoom in, this is what we've got so far. Now one thing I do want to kind of recognize real fast is that I don't think my image is necessarily centered, because this drone is going to be relatively symmetrical, kind of from left to right and from front to back. But I can see this image, this blue arrow, which is kind of along my 0 point. This is not in the middle of my image. It's kind of like shifted over. So I'm going to want to go back to my viewport settings and offset this image slightly. Now, you could go in Photoshop and pull out rulers and crop your image, you know, if you wanted to be super precise. That would be a good idea. Obviously, when you're going to be starting with a primitive shape, the more accurate you are from the beginning, kind of the better off you'll be going you know, kind of through the rest of the program. So I think the side over here is pretty even. I'm more or less just kind of trying to line up these colored arrows with the body of this. So I think this is a pretty good start. Now, you might be thinking that this would be a good idea to maybe start extruding some corners out here to start making the arms, or you know, even maybe first just kind of roughing out the size of this cube. I know that not that one. I know that I kind of want to just focus on this top portion where the arms are. I'm going to sort of ignore from the legs down, at least temporarily. With something like this, you kind of want to just pick your focus and try to work on one area at a time. So I'm going to focus on this top body part here, but I'm not just going to start, you know, grabbing my knife tool and extruding these arms out. I really want to tackle this as smartly as possible, and one way that I'm recognizing, at least with the way that my drone is shaped, is because it is symmetrical from side to side and from front to back, that I can use symmetry to my advantage. And I can do that by basically really only making 1/4 of this. I really only need to focus on one quadrant of the body and one arm, and only one propeller, and only one, whatever this motor battery thing is right here. I really only need to make one of each of these when it comes to the main body, you know, the upper half of this. So I'm just gonna focus on the top right, just for fun. So I could grab the knife tool and start, you know, splitting this thing up, but I think what I want to do is I want to, in my cube, I want to raise some of my segments a little bit, just so that I've got a little extra something to work with. Now you'll notice that I edited my segment values, but you weren't seeing anything in the viewport change, and the reason for that is because I want to set this to wireframe. I want it on lines and wireframe for the time being. And so we can see, if we go back to display lines up here, I can see that I've got some divisions on my cube, which I think will make me happy. So I can just make this editable, but I'm always kind of like a pack rat when it comes to these, so I'm just gonna make a copy real quick and put it in a little old folder, just in case, you know, if I really screw this up 10 minutes from now, you never know, I might want to go back to that cube and start over. So I will make this one editable by hitting C, and I can just switch to point mode and jump to my live selection, and I'm going to select all these other, oopsie daisy, I'm going to select all these other points from the quadrants that I don't want to focus on. So I want to uncheck only select visible elements, at least for the time being. That way I can select all these vertices and hit delete.
Were you holding anything when you were mousing over that?
Nope.
Okay.
The reason it worked in one motion is because I did it in one motion. I've got left click held down this whole time, and I'm just mousing over. If I let go, then I would want to hold down shift and mouse over more stuff.
Okay.
If I wanted to select more stuff. But I don't, so I'm just going to undo and go back. Alright, so I'm going to delete those, and I'm just going to set up symmetry, the symmetry stuff just for the fun of it, I think. Now I want to set up, in my case, 2 symmetry objects. I want a symmetry kind of one piece, and then use the second symmetry to duplicate pieces 1 and 2 to create pieces 3 and 4. Kind of like a, I'm basically duplicating it twice. And so it's going to be really beneficial for you if you set up the symmetry stuff early on, before you've started moving stuff around and mucking about with the different objects. Right now my cube is still centered around the origin, the center point. So I'm going to set up 2 symmetry objects right now. I'm just going to make 2 of them. And notice that I did not group them. I'm going to group them in a specific way, as you'll see. So I've just got them made, and I'm just going to save my project for the first time, just to be good about that. So this is assignment 4 drone version 1. Alright, I've got my project saved, ready to move. So I'm going to drag my cube, which I'm going to name drone body. I really would like to emphasize that you guys should name stuff kind of as early on in the process as possible. That way you don't wind up with cylinder 32 by the end of this project, because that's just going to be a drag, because you will have to rename every single object eventually for this assignment. I'm not just saying like I'm not just like preaching like as a life thing, as you know, an artist in 3D. Like for this assignment you will have to name every object in your scene when it comes time to transfer it over to Keyshot. So if you can rename things one at a time, that'll save you a whole day of just renaming stuff at the end of this. Let's just drag the drone body into the first symmetry object, and you'll see that this made a symmetry from left to right, which is fine, but I'm just going to switch this axis. I just switched the mirror plane to the XY because I want it to be front to back and then side to side. This doesn't really matter that much, but I just kind of want to be sort of nitpicky about this. And then I'm going to drag the first symmetry up into the second one, and so now you can see that that just made the other half of the body. So as I uncheck the symmetry objects, we'll see that we're going from just one quadrant, to 2 quadrants, to 4 quadrants. And so the reason for this is because we're just going to focus on modeling 1/4 of this and not all 4 quarters of this, because although it would be a good learning exercise for you practicing your modeling tools and all that, to do this 4 times, it would kind of not be that good of an idea. That's just super inefficient. And part of becoming a skilled artist is obviously knowing all the buttons and having a keen artistic eye, but also being productive, speedy, and organized. So I think now we can just jump back to our top camera, and I think we can start modeling the corner of this now. So one thing I do want to notice is there's a little bit of like kind of a curvature kinda to this body. Ignore this kind of white battery pack thing and just focus on the line, this visual line here. So I'm going to pull all these points. Again, I'm using my spacebar, and I've got my only select visible elements off. The reason for this is because I'll just show you if you have it on, and I'll do what I'm going to try to do. Basically, I want to move this point down to match this arc, and you'll see if I jump out here, I didn't grab all the points. My object's not shaped right now. That's what that checkbox is doing. Whereas if I mouse all over these points now with this checkbox off, I can now move all of them. and this is going to be important to replicate this curve in the case of my drone, because the whole upper body is curved. We're going to worry about this battery pack, you know, that's another day or another hour, depending on how quickly we go. So I'm just going to grab the side point over there and move this in a little bit too. Cool. I've kind of got like a weird ninja star kind of going on. So with this point up here in the corner, what I'm going to do actually is, instead of moving it out like this and trying to do like something weird and wacky, I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm going to pull it in closer towards the body. Now this is not really an exact science, I don't think. Let me see if I can get it to be... yes, okay. So I can get this kind of on an exact axis. Instead of just grabbing the corner arrow here so that I can move it, if I want to be a little bit more precise about this, you know, sure, I could kind of eyeball this and try to kind of line it up in the middle. But I can change the way my move tool operates by going to the move tool and coming to this modeling axis tab and this orientation. This is kind of like it's kind of like I don't know. We're gonna tell this kind of, you know, little L-shaped cursor what direction really to face. It's kind of like using the rotate tool for the move tool, if that sort of makes sense. So we're going to select the word normal, and that will allow us, we can see now that the angle that this is pointing on is parallel with this arm. This is a little bit more precise, and now I can pull this in this direction, and it'll be lined up. It's going to be equidistant along this side and this side. That's a fun math term.
It's moving relative to the orientation.
Yeah. So what a normal is it's kind of the direction that either a polygon or an edge or a point is facing. Normal that's just kind of the definition term. So usually it's on axis, which is relative to the world axis, just kind of the global Cinema 4D's world. It's kind of left, right, you know, 90-degree angles left and right. But normal can be a pretty useful setting sometimes. So now we're getting something that's almost kind of cylinder shaped, but the reason we didn't just use a cylinder is because we wanted to edit kind of the positions of these a little bit more precisely. And just in general, this is going to give you a little bit more control in the case of this specific shape. So now what I can do is I can start extruding out along these, the length of this arm. So I can grab my polygons. Cool. And I can extrude, which is just MT. I just used the letter D, which is like the super shortcut. There's like shortcuts and then there's super shortcuts. D is just the super shortcut for the extrude tool. So if I just left click and drag outwards, we're going to see this is going to look kind of crazy. Not necessarily the shape we're looking for, but what we can do now is, to maintain a little bit of precision, what I want to do is I want to scale these corners in. Again, it's in my case super important to have this checkbox off, the only select visible elements. So I'm going to turn that one off, or turn it off, and then select that edge up there and that corner over there, and then I'm going to scale these. So I'm going to jump to my scale tool, and again I'm going to switch my orientation on my scale tool from axis to normal, and this will give me a perfect straight line between these. And if I scale in this direction, we'll start to see It's going to look a little weird, but I can always move this kind of in and then scale these two edges out. I'm not focusing on the point up there. I've got this, now it's like even more Ninja Star. I'm just focusing on these two corners, trying to line these up with the shape of the body. Now it looks like my image is a hair off axis because this one's not exactly on, but this one is exactly on. But it's good enough. You know, this isn't like a CAD like engineering course, so I'm going to say good enough is good enough. So I'm just going to pull this one in a little bit, and now it's going to be important for you to not have edges that are too kind of like crazy triangular shaped. Like this would be, technically there's nothing wrong with this, but it's gonna make your life a little bit easier if you kind of group your points together and kind of create these nice sort of flowing lines. And we'll see, you know, it'll become more apparent. Oh, that's fun. So the joy of only select visible elements being off is sometimes you select stuff you didn't mean to select. Whoopsie daisy. I selected the bottom of our drone, as we can see, which was not something I wanted to do. I definitely don't want any of that. So I'm going to jump to the selection tool and select those and delete them. Whoopsie daisy. So now this thing's not going to have a bottom side, but that's alright. I think we can figure that out later. We're just going to try to keep moving forward. So I'm going to select, and yep, don't want to do that. So I'm going to hold Control to deselect those ones down there. And now I can get back on this arm extruding spree that we're about to go down. So I'm going to use my super shortcut D to extrude again. And we're just going to pull this arm out. Now it's going to be kind of a little annoying, like moving and then scaling and then moving and then scaling. But the kind of more diligent you are and the sort of more patient you are, the more keen your eye is on this step, it's really going to save you a lot of headache down the road. I really can't emphasize that enough. So I made this edge and I'm just kind of following along the length of this arm, and I can just jump back. I'm basically just going to jump back and forth between the polygon tool and our polygon select, extrude, go to point, kind of scale them. So I'm just going to work these edges out real quick without talking too much. Play some Jeopardy music in your head or something. So I'm actually going to stop moving these kind of in an outward pointing direction, and I'm actually going to sort of level them out, kind of almost so that they're all in a line together. And the reason for that is going to be that we are going to use the help of a cylinder now to get this outer shape. So it's a good point to save. So we're just going to set this cylinder up real quick, and then we'll take a break in a second. So we're going to start with just a primitive cylinder up here. We're going to move this guy over here, and we're going to just try to center it, sort of. It'll be a little tough to see, so I'm going to switch back temporarily to isoparms. And that's pretty well centered to that propeller blade. It's not an engineering class again, I'd like to stress. And then in model select, I can use a little orange handle to shrink this down a little bit. And what I'm looking on out here is sort of this outer rim. I'm not focusing on down where the arm connects. I'm kind of just trying to get this as correct as possible. So that looks pretty good. I'll jump back to wireframe.
Now the only thing with your arm being off is that's gonna be offset a little bit now, right? That's why we really need to get this centered as good as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you can see, Nancy makes a good point that the further I travel down along my arm, kind of the more off kilter I got. Now it's possible that this arm isn't 100,000,000% symmetrical like I thought it was, and it's just kind of like 99% symmetrical. That's totally possible, and I could correct for that by moving some stuff over a little bit, which I think I might give a shot. And so I selected all of these, and then I'm going to deselect these rows one row at a time. This is kind of it's nice to work in this order as opposed to kind of doing it the other way. So this one and this one can scale out a little bit, and these ones can come out a little bit. So that looks a little closer, I think. You can notice that because this one is not on the leading edge, it doesn't have the same normals. So I'm just gonna, I literally just like scrub through these to see if I can figure it out on how to get it to work. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Nope, these are just kind of going all over the place. And I don't remember what that was supposed to be set at. So there used to be a reset to diff. That's grayed out. Cool. I think selected is what it's supposed to be on. It's one of those things I know it's there, but I never actually look at it to like remember what it's supposed to be. All right. So we've got our cylinder kind of lined up. Let's get back to extruding out this arm. Now, obviously the cylinder is a little bit too tall, but we're just kind of focusing on our top camera for the time being. We'll deal with that later. So I extruded that out so that the middle point up there lines up pretty close, and then now I'm going to move these edges out here, kind of out, or forward, and then now out. Trying to line these up with the body, or not with the, not necessarily with the picture, but with the cylinder. Just because, like, at this point, you know, I haven't been super 100,000,000% accurate. So it's better to just go off, in my opinion, it's better to go off of my object at this point as opposed to my picture. The picture's only going to get you so far. You know, it's not like an accurate engineering blueprint. We're not working with precise measurements or precise units, so I think this will be good enough. So we can kind of notice right now that our body is super low polygon. It's a very PlayStation 1 era level of graphics here, and this cylinder is just way more round. This has way more subdivisions or rotation segments. So I'm just going to notch this down a whole bunch, and now there's a little bit of a methodology to what I'm about to pick. and that number happens to be the number 8. But if you model yours slightly differently, that number might be 10, it might be 12, it might be 16. Chances are it won't be an odd number though. Odd numbers are kind of rare when working with this sort of thing, but basically what I've done is I've lowered the rotation segments until I've got an amount of points that are almost like they're about to line up kind of with each other. We can see that these points right here line up very close with each other. These are almost exactly overlapping from the cylinder to the arm. These are like almost perfect right here. And these corners up here are pretty close. They're good enough. But I don't want to pick like 10 because now these points like don't line up. You know, you kind of want to be in that Goldilocks zone where you've got just the right amount of points. You don't want too many or too few. So I'm just going to drop that back down to 8. And I think it will be a good time to take a little bit of a break. We will regroup at 6:10, 10 after.